What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, two underscores ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at ProAnt. No underscores there, just PROANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we will be diving into several Buffalo Bills training camp pieces now that Bills camp is essentially, complete with its first week, roughly. They had an off day on Saturday, but we're essentially through the first week of Bills training camp. Have the scrimmage coming up this upcoming Friday. And before we know it, preseason football for the Bills will be right around the corner. There's also preseason football for the NFL this week. Thursday, I believe, is the Hall of Fame game between the Chargers and I forget who else, but we have some semblance of football coming down the pike league-wide, and even more so for the Bills coming up in the couple of weeks. And, today, we're going to get through this throughout the show, but just a slew of different, I was going to say random, but it's not really random. A slew of injuries have hit this Bills team. We started out with some guys getting banged up or being already banged up coming into the start of training camp, not suiting up at all at this point. Then we've had guys who have, picked up some knocks throughout, the first week and coming into this week. And there's just been a slew of guys going down, a slew of injuries, both from a quantity perspective and from like a quality perspective in terms of the guys who are picking up these knocks and getting hurt and the variety of injuries that we've seen. So it's thrown some of the competitions and some of the reps and some of the drills and some of the work and some of the performances that we've seen or read about into kind of a bit of a muddy situation. So we're going to talk about that tonight, but overall, we're going to frame that within the larger context of how this Bills roster is starting to shape out 1 week into training camp, what we've seen from a competition perspective, what we've seen amongst several position groups of interest coming into camp and throughout. I have been to 3 practices as of today. Last one was this past Sunday. I'm looking to go again towards the back end of this week and attend the scrimmage as well. So a lot of what we will be going over tonight is based on my own individual evaluations, being there, seeing things live and in person, going over it, and then also tying together with some notes from some folks that I do trust and some people who've done some extra work and have been there every day, and me being able to piece some things together on the days that I haven't been there. And as always, as we are here on the show, any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything you folks have, anything training camp related or Bills related, football related, whatever, wrestling related, if you'd like, feel free to put it up into the comments, and I'll pull it up as much as I physically and possibly can. As always, super chats get priority because I respect the monetary donation, but also the color attracts me from my notes and brings me back towards the comments and the screen. So yeah, if there's anything on your mind or if you have a question on somebody that you feel like hasn't been talked about enough or a question on a specific aspect, feel free to put up in chat. We will go through it throughout this episode. Appreciate the people tuning in live. It's always nice to have some good attendance when we do these shows live, and especially when I'm solo, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. So I appreciate everybody stopping by and being here live. What's up, Jason? What's up, Charles? What's up, RJ? Love this comment from RJ. RJ says, looking forward to another trip to One Pie again before the blue and red scrimmage this Friday. RJ, are you going to get the Cover One pizza again, the Cover One Josh Allen goat, or are you going to get something else? I need to know. Also, what did you think of the blue cheese? I don't know if you're a blue cheese guy or not, but one of my favorite pieces of what they do is their homemade blue cheese. I would like to know your thoughts on that. I don't think I got your thoughts last time. I think it was just on the Allen goat and how good it was, which is also fair. What's up, Lou? Lou says it's a good evening to have a good evening. Here's hoping our guys can get healthy in a hurry. 1000% and absolutely. Also, shout out to you, Lou. You are one of my more consistent supporters over on Blue Sky, and I enjoy being over there. So I appreciate you for that. Okay, Maury says, getting some sacrifices ready for my altar to heal the injured Bills. Yeah, man. Again, we're going to get into it within these position groups and some of the pieces today in general, but I had a busy day at work today, but I was kind of tying in some pieces where I could on Bills camp, and I felt like I had a decent amount of time in the morning to kind of take a peek at some things. And I feel like every time I went back to look at something Bills related, it was like, oh, so-and-so just went down. So-and-so went down. Oh, so-and-so was hurt. Oh, so-and-so was in the medical tent. And that was on top of guys who have already missed days and already being injured. It's definitely put a bit of a damper on things. And we're seeing injuries league wide across the league. But I do feel like, and again, as is not tradition, but as is customary when with the start of training camp. But I feel like the Bills are really towards the top of the league in terms of quality or quantity, but also guys that have been hurt. As well. Roy says, are you cool with Gunther being world champion again? Yeah, I think Gunther is fantastic. I was a huge fan of him back when he was still known as Walter. And I'm just happy that I didn't think he would ever be a guy that would get a shine or proper run in WWE because of what he looked like, even though I thought he was an awesome wrestler. But they've done a great job kind of pushing him to the moon a bit. I really hope he doesn't lose to Punk because I cannot stand Punk. I keep track of WWE. I don't really watch it because of I don't the in-ring week to week doesn't really do enough for me. I like AEW more and New Japan because they treat it more like the sport of professional wrestling. But yes, I am very much cool with Gunther. I think he's absolutely tremendous. Comment here with how long it's taking. I think it's not as bad as it could be. That's fair because if it was, they'd know immediately. No, that's fair with some of the injuries, right? I think that's a fair point because if they know or if they knew immediately, it would be bad. Like, oh, so-and-so's done, especially with the Hairston piece. It's kind of like, you're seeing them check the stability of the knee, but there's no definitive, yep, he tore his ACL. And so there's a fair point. That kind of waiting and knowing there is building that anticipation and anxiety, but also it could potentially be a good thing because if it was definitive, usually it's more towards the negative side. So that's a fair point. I was like, and then the Go Bills from Korea. We're global out here. Like that. RJ says probably the Meat Lovers pizza they have next. Their blue cheese was phenomenal. I'm a huge blue cheese guy. Absolutely. Oh, Lou says, anything I can do to help out here in the PNW? Yeah, the Pacific Northwest. Super proud of the Mafia for showing up well in Seattle last year, by the way. Absolutely. Good call. RJ says, yeah, these injuries are destroying our collective mental health. It felt like every 5 minutes there was another name, especially with how this team, they were so healthy early on in the McDermott and Beane tenure. And then I felt like the last several years, they haven't had a ton of injuries from a volume perspective, but it felt like important guys kept getting hurt. And then it felt like they turned the corner again with Spencer Brown being healthy. And now he comes into camp banged up after having an already like injury-filled start to his career. And it's the back again, which is also scary. It's tough. Connor says, I'm numb and can't be brought down by injury news since Milano last year. That's fair. Good comment. RJ says, AEW over WWE, at least for my own personal style of wrestling I like. I completely agree. That's just kind of the style I gravitate towards. I gravitate towards the Ring of Honor, New Japan, indie type of wrestling style. And peak wrestling for me, I don't remember what the years were, but peak wrestling for me is New Japan Pro Wrestling from like 2012, 2013 through like 2019. Like wrestling will never, in-ring wrestling will like never be better for me in that point. And that's just the style I gravitate towards. And I think AEW is built in that mold. Ironically, they have a lot of New Japan guys and a lot of Ring of Honor guys. But yeah, man, that, especially with what AEW is doing now, absolutely cooking. Whew. Yeah, absolutely. Roy says, I've heard some saying that White, meaning Trey White, has looked really good in camp and others saying he's showing his age. And then a little thoughtful kind of emoji. What's your take, parentheses, opinion? We're going to lead off with Trey White and the cornerback position grouping. So that's an excellent segue. Roy also says, I don't watch wrestling anymore. Just catch some highlight reels on YouTube. Yeah, that's what I do for WWE. AEW, I watch regularly. New Japan, I watch regularly as well. So let us dive into this first piece. Okay. Got the header and the banner up there. It says Bills training camp position battles. So the comment there from RJ asking about Trey White, and that's the first position I want to lead off with here, specifically referencing Trey White, but the cornerback position in general, I think is an absolute dogfight. And I want to preface this by mentioning the injury piece to Max Harrison again. Max Harrison, if you are unaware, went down in practice today, Tuesday, July 29th. Went down, non-contact injury. Multiple reporters mentioned that player saying it was like a freak kind of trip up. But anytime you see non-contact, anytime it's non-contact and someone is grabbing at their ankle, anytime it's non-contact and someone's grabbing at their ankle or their knee, it's not ideal. He goes down, non-contact. Trainers are working on his knee. They're doing the old stability test with his knee, which is usually you're trying to check, is the meniscus intact? Is the ACL intact? All things that are not ideal. Now, he was kind of walked off, carried off a little bit. I haven't heard anything definitive or conclusive about that as of now, but you've got the injury to Max Hairston. Aside from that, I'm going to treat this like, hey, until we know that Hairston's done or is going to miss time, I'm going to treat it like, he'll be back eventually. We're going to treat this like the battle that it is. I do think Trey White has looked good in camp. And even I thought he would be a fine CB3, right? I thought, his experience in the system, his skill set, his traits. I thought he had some flashes on tape last year. I know someone might jump in and be like, what do you mean flashes? Like, he got cut by the Rams. He was like a dime corner for the Ravens. I thought there was still some encouraging pieces for him last year on the tape. And I think Trey, again, coming back from the injuries that he's coming back from, I do think it's this weird kind of trying to almost catch lightning in a bottle a bit. I feel like with each passing year that he stays healthy, he gets further away from those injuries and has the potential to get healthier and get better. But also another year is another year older, potentially more miles on the tires. You're kind of losing some of your juice and your speed and your quickness. So it's this weird, almost kind of like no man's land situation that he's caught in. And I didn't know what completely to expect from him coming into camp, but right from the jump, seeing him on Wednesday, on day 1, Wednesday, on day 2, on Thursday, and then I saw him again on Sunday on day 4. Just good short area burst, good juice, good lower body movement. He looked, and I want to also preface this too. You folks know how superstitious I am. Major fingers crossed and no jinx with everything positive that I say in this episode. Also, in general, that should be a blanket rule and statement for this show going forward. But the biggest thing for me with Trey is I thought he looked healthy. He was moving like he was healthy, especially in his lower body. The footwork, the hip movement, planting, change of direction, being able to, break down and twist and turn everything. This did not look like someone who had multiple significant lower body injuries, which was tremendous to hear. And what also I think helps for him at this stage in his career, he was never a guy whose game was predicated on speed and athleticism. He was never a pitcher that, he throws like 99 miles an hour with that fastball. Doesn't really have a second or third pitch, but man, he could throw the heater, and that heater's hard to hit. And so it wasn't like, but once he gets to his late 20s or early 30s and he's only throwing 94 or 93, is he going to be able to last? He's always been more of a guy who he had a second pitch, he had a third pitch, he had a fourth pitch. Like he was a good pitcher. He was somebody who won off of technique, off of footwork, off of body position and leverage and hand placement and being able to read route distributions and function within his, zone coverage responsibilities and assignments, being able to collect, being able to pass off, even being able to function in man in a variety of ways. He was such a technique-based player that I think his skill set ages gracefully. Now, you can also play devil's advocate and play the other side and say, yeah, but you know what? If you're not the most athletic dude or you're not the fastest, as you get older, you're only going to get more unathletic and less fast. So, where does that kind of fall into things, which is a fair point. But I do think before the injuries happen, and those are variables, obviously, that are thrown into it, I always thought he had a skill set that would age gracefully because, again, he was the type of pitcher who could pitch. He was like a Greg Maddux type of pitcher. Like, you've got 4 or 5 quality pitches you can throw. You're not predicated on pure power. It's built on location and technique and keeping hitters off balance. I thought he would age well. He's looked good in camp to start. Now, independent of what Hairston has done or what he's been or the injury, I thought Trey has looked good. Multiple really good coverage reps in terms of passing off and collecting, some really good man coverage reps. He's battled. He's been in phase. He's been sticky. I know he got beat during camp today at one point by Steven Gosnell. I know there's been even a couple other times too. I saw him get beat at times in coverage. I think a key piece also, I want to put this out there, and I'm not knocking anyone. I'm not gatekeeping anything. I'm not doing any of that. Something, and this is kind of related to Trey, but also just related to coverage and receiver pieces in general. Take everything with a grain of salt whenever you see like, so-and-so caught a pass and they beat so-and-so on the play. unless it's pure man coverage, it's tough to discern who's getting quote unquote beat on the play. Somebody might be the nearest defender to the target catching the pass, and that defender might not be responsible for that receiver being open or that tight end being open or whoever. So keep that in mind. The nearest defender doesn't always mean, and that's usually how it gets tracked, right? If Christian Benford is the closest guy to Keon Coleman and Keon Coleman makes the catch, someone's going to be like, oh, a catch by Keon Coleman beat Christian Benford on the play. Coleman might not have been Benford's assignment or responsibility on that play. He just ended up being the closest guy in that picture when somebody realized, oh, hey, Keon Coleman made a catch. Oh, and Benford was right there. He must have beat Benford. So always take those notes with a grain of salt when it comes into camp. People, I don't think, aren't necessarily looking at the coverage or knowing the coverage and being able to discern, okay, this is what so-and-so was supposed to do. That guy that got open was really someone else's responsibility, or there was a coverage bust, so on and so forth. I kind of just want to put that out there. But yeah, Trey has looked good. Again, it was the short area burst and quickness for me that really did it. Him being able to cover whip routes and, stops and hitches and being able to be in his pedal and slow play it and then just trigger and shoot. I wasn't expecting that level of short area burst and quickness, whether it was just from the age thing or the injuries or just how he always kind of was as a player. I wasn't expecting that. I thought he has looked good. We'll see how Max Hairston's health goes. Up until this point, prior to the injury, I thought Hairston had some really good high highs. I thought he also had some low lows. There was, the nice PBU on day one, but he also gets that PBU because he kind of gets beat inside a little bit, but he has the recovery speed to recover and get the PBU. Right before that, he had a really nice break on the ball where he almost had an interception on the sideline against Curtis Samuel. I think quarterback just fit the ball in there. But then he's also had some coverage busts. He's also had some mistakes, which, again, I think is par for the course for rookies in general, but especially corners. I think corner is one of the hardest positions to play in all of football. It's just so tough, especially in today's NFL. And the type of dudes you have to cover and the variety of coverages you have to execute, and especially in a defense like the Bills where they're trying to build out all these adjustments and checks and being assignment sound based on motion and alignment and shifts and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to mention these two and kind of lead off with this one because obviously the injury to Hairston is notable today, and we'll see what that yields. But two, I thought Trey has looked good, and I've seen a lot of people kind of knocking Trey looking good, or maybe I should say Trey looking better than Hairston, and conflating that with that meaning Hairston sucks, and that meaning that like the Bills are cooked, quote unquote. Everybody loves to use that phrase nowadays, but the Bills are cooked because Trey is old and washed. So if Trey looks like he's going to be CB2, that means the Bills CB2 competition sucks because Trey has to suck. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think Trey looking good and performing well in camp and being written about positively across the board, I don't think that's due to nostalgia. I don't think that's due to Hairston looking bad or anybody else looking bad. Trey has legitimately looked good as a CB2, and it helps that opposite him is Christian Benford or whoever's going to play CB2. Opposite of them is Christian Benford, who's a true CB1 at this point and gives you a lot of flexibility and firepower at that CB1 spot. But Trey has looked good. And the better Trey looks, that does not mean Hairston looks worse. I thought Hairston, even on day one and day two, for as good as Trey looked, I thought Hairston had higher highs than Trey. He just unfortunately had, lower lows. And again, considering Trey's experience, his familiarity with this defense, it makes sense that someone like him is going to come in and just be consistent and ready at that spot. You're not going to have those ebbs and flows, those peaks and valleys that a rookie would, especially one like Max Hairston, who does play more to the athleticism and the juice than he does to the technique and the polish and the refinement. So they're two different types of players, both operating in different ways. But I think Trey has looked good. Him and Hairston, day one and day two, Trey got the lion's share of CB2 reps with the ones. Hairston got worked in there a bit. I would say the first 2 days was probably like 60-40 in favor of Trey. Day four, when I was there in camp, I think it was further than that. I would say it's probably like 80-20 in favor of Trey. So regardless of the injury, I think Trey is the front runner for CB2 right now, starting on this defense opposite of Christian Benford. That does not mean Hairston can't get better. It doesn't mean Hairston won't eventually beat him out or overtake him. It doesn't mean Trey is bad. That doesn't mean Hairston is bad. All these negativity pieces and things that I've seen, I don't think it means any of that. I think Trey has looked good. I don't think this means, of course, because McDermott doesn't play rookies. All these added conclusions that are jumped to off of this one thing, I do not think that's the case. I genuinely think Trey has looked good. We'll see what happens when the Bullets are live, right? We'll see what happens in preseason. We'll see what happens in regular season. I think that's obviously a key piece. Camp will only tell us so much. Once pads start really popping and Bullets are live, we'll start to get a better picture of the team in general and the players in general. But again, I've seen a lot of knocks on, Trey looking good or him beating Hairston, meaning that that's bad. I think, again, Trey's looked good. His fit, it makes sense. And he can push or beat out a healthy Max Hairston because he offers more consistency. His technique is more sound. And then he looks good physically on top of it. And his familiarity with the defense, everything. So I think Trey has looked very good. We'll see what Hairston's health. Again, this whole conversation could be moot because if Hairston tore his ACL or he had something serious, Trey's going to be your CB2 and everything else really doesn't matter. What I also wanted to mention within the Trey and Hairston conversation, cornerback in general, I think is going to be a dogfight for making this team. You've got Hairston, you've got Trey, you've got Dane Jackson, you've got Dorian Strong, you've got Jamarcus Ingram, and Jamarcus Ingram had a tremendous interception on Sunday. In a vacuum, if I'm talking about like the best plays of training camp or maybe even the best play, that interception from Jamarcus Ingram really is up there for me. They were playing cover 3. He's got his deep third responsibility. The quarterback tried to fit it into the seam. He read it, triggered, undercut it, jumped it, picked it. It was such a really great play. And I like the type of player that he is. He's got inside-outside versatility. We saw him get some dime looks with the starters last year when Taron Johnson was banged up to start the year. Even someone like that, like Jamarcus Ingram is, one of the guys that quote unquote towards the bottom of the depth chart. He's still somebody that can play and he's really good on special teams. I know everybody hates hearing that, but that does have value. So between Dane and Strong and Ingram and even Daquan Hardy, you've got Cam Lewis, you've got Jordan Hancock. Like there is a lot of competition for the outside corner spots, for the nickel spot, the backups, the roles. I really do think corner is an absolute dogfight. It is one of the positions I will have my eyes on most when I'm watching tape this preseason. Even during the scrimmage this Friday, every day that I'm at camp going forward, corner really is an absolute dogfight. And if Hairston is out for any type of significant time, it just bumps everybody up on that depth chart a spot up, and it just creates more competition. It probably creates another opportunity for somebody to make the roster, but it creates more competition because now Trey moves to CB2. So then who's CB3? Is it Dane Jackson? Is it Dorian Strong? Is it Jamarcus Ingram? Is it somebody else? Does Cam Lewis have the nickel spot on lock? What do you get from Jordan Hancock? Is he the nickel? Is he, he's also getting some work at safety. I really like the Corey Couch. I know this is a small one and it may be just because I'm a Miami Hurricanes guy. I really like Corey Couch getting some look at safety. I'm really excited to see him work at safety just with the type of physicality that he brings. I don't think he has the juice and the chops to play slot and play corner in the NFL like he did at Miami. I think safety could be a really good fit for him. Like they've got all these fun DBs, even in the safety room to a degree as well, but really at the corner spot, outside and inside, at outside CB and at nickel. It's an absolute dogfight at corner. One of the best position battles that I think is going to only intensify as we go forward, as we start to see preseason games, you start to see the scrimmage. And again, on camp every day, like even though the receivers have been banged up a bit, which is unfortunate because you're not really getting good on good all the time like you'd like to see, corner, even at the top, I think Trey and Hairston is a microcosm for that corner grouping as a whole, with just being an absolute dogfight at that spot to absolutely make this team. Charles says, love Trey, but I'd be concerned if he's a day one starter. If the Bills want to play more man on D, it doesn't really mesh with his strengths. We're going to have to see how he handles and carries himself in man, right? And I also don't think they're going to be a team that's going to predominantly play man. I do think he has enough chops that he can play man to the level that they want to play it. I think they're going to use more man coverage in high leverage situations in more specific areas. I don't think they're going to be a team that goes from, I forget what their range was last year, but if their range was 10% man last year, I don't think they're going to jump up to 20. I think maybe you could see like 15, 16 at the most, which is still a good percentage point increase. But I think you'll see it more in, on third downs, or maybe in certain red zone situations, or maybe against certain looks. Also, again, because you've got Benford on the other side, it allows you to do different coverage things and a lot of split field stuff. You can play man to one side with Benford, you can play zone to the other and still be competent. Or, the type of man coverage you can play doesn't necessarily have to be single high. If you play two man, which is man coverage with two safeties over the top, Trey can do that all day because he can reroute a bit and get into a trail technique. And if he has a safety over the top, I think that can still get the job done. And then even if we're getting into other things, the odd mirror pieces and rushing three and the aggressive spy, I do think he's capable enough. I don't think he's going to be a plus defender in man coverage, but I think he can do enough to get it done that it's not going to significantly hinder the defense. Also, on top of that, Hairston may have the juice and the athleticism and the traits that you'd like for man coverage. He doesn't have a ton of experience in it. For as much as the talk is like his speed and athleticism and juice and recovery speed and everything, he was predominantly a zone corner in Kentucky. They ran a ton of single high, a lot of cover three. So he's used to playing more off coverage and more zone than he is man. His man coverage stuff needs more polish and needs more refinement. So Hairston may be the guy that you see that speed and you're like, oh, that's a man coverage guy all day, but he's not really a man coverage corner yet at this point in terms of a confidence level from me in my evaluation, but teach their own. But I recognize where it comes from, Charles. I love this comment from Lewis, says I'm not superstitious, just a little stitious. And he says, Trey has always had enough speed and athleticism to do the things, but it was never what he had to lean on to get the job done. Yeah, those guys tend to age gracefully a bit. Judah loves slot corners. Also recognize you from Blue Sky. Thank you for being in the comments. What's up? Judah says, I went to camp the other day and it looked like Trey was ahead of Max. Max's reps were pretty up and down. Yep, I concur. I thought Max had some reps where I was like, ooh, that's nice. And then I had some ones where I was like, oh, that's not good. But for me, that's nothing crazy because that I kind of expect that from rookies in general, but especially at corner. Corner is super hard to play like in the NFL. It's just really, really, really tough. James says Trey has regained his fastball. I like you continuing the metaphor or whatever it is. Alec, no. What am I thinking of here? I don't know. Something along the lines of metaphor. I'm losing my literary terms in my brain. I'm fried, but I get what you're putting down, James, and I like it. Lou says, sometimes I worry that Elam scrambled our collective brains. I think that's fair. John says, 2 years ago, Trey and Benford were starting CBs to open the season, and everyone was terrified of Benford playing. Life comes at you fast. That is fair. Roy says, I'll take Trey over effing Dane Jackson. I think Dane got a bit of a harsh rep when he was here, but I think that's a fair point. James says, depending on Max's injury, is a good question. Do you think Beane looks for someone outside the team? I don't, because I think they're, rightly or wrongly, I think they're comfortable and confident with Trey being CB2, Dane being 3, or Jamarcus Ingram being 3, and them cobbling together a top 4. I could see them doing something like reaching out to Rasul Douglas or somebody who they liked from a culture standpoint and from a high floor standpoint. But there's not really a lot of corners out there unless, like, the corner market, for example, like Asante Samuel Jr. is still out there, but he had neck surgery in April. So he's a guy that's like, it's just wonky out there on the corner market. I think they would look internal, if not like make a call to Rasul Douglas and kind of go from there. Maybe outside chance. This one's mainly for Joe DeRosa. Outside chance it's Stephon Gilmore, but I doubt it. Roy, similar comment. If there are any CBs available in free agency or trade, not really at this point. I still would take a flyer on Asante Samuel Jr. because I love his game and the way he fits. But I don't know how healthy his neck is. And the fact that he's still on the open market, given his talent level, it's got to be due to the neck and the surgery. And that gives me big pause for concern, especially considering we're already dealing with injuries now at this point. Rockpile says Ingram is like Mark Jindrak. Mark Jindrak has versatility with the right booking in WCW and WWE, and then goes to CMLL and crushes. Nice reference. I know that this is Drew all day because Drew is such a huge wrestling fan. I like this. I'm seeing multiple comments from multiple people who mentioned Rasul Douglas. And so, yeah, I'm not even going to pull up those comments relating to it. Yeah, I could see them calling him and kind of being like, hey, man, You want to come be like CB4 or CB3? Oh, this is a fair comment from RJ. RJ says if Dane Jackson, not necessarily the beginning part, but he says if Dane Jackson was in place of Kyer in the AFC Championship game, we may actually win that game. Jackson isn't good, but he isn't bad either. I think that's such a good way to put it. Dane Jackson, for me, I think he's just a high floor player. There's no great ceiling. There's not a ton of sexiness. I mean, he was one of the few, I forget how many, because it was so many years ago. He was on a short list of corners that had double-digit PBUs his last year as a starter with the Bills. And that was on top of being in phase and not getting other pass breakups that everybody like ripped him for. So yeah, I think that's fair. Another position I want to talk about here in terms of camp position battles, this one a little lighter in terms of the conversation. Safety, I've talked about it so much on the show throughout this offseason and even on last week's episode with Joe Marino. Taylor Rapp, I think, is locked into a safety spot. The other safety spot, it looks like it's Cole Bishop's job to lose. I don't think Bishop has done necessarily anything tremendous yet to say, oh, yeah, he's locked that spot down. But I don't think he's done anything to lose it. DeMar Hamlin has also gotten some reps with the ones, so has Derek Forrest. But it looks like it's going to be a pairing of Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp. I think Bishop would really have to fall off a cliff or throw up on himself to lose that job. And he's done a couple things that I thought were nice, a couple late safety spins and rotations, showing the athleticism, blowing up some receivers as a force player and kind of working through some things on some screens, kind of in routes to the flat. But I expect it to be Rapp and Bishop. It looks like, again, it's Bishop's job to lose, which we expected going into camp. He's really going to have to fall off a cliff to lose it. But we have seen some other safeties get work with the ones. So just putting that out there. Another one that I think is interesting. RJ loves the Mark Jindrak comparison. I knew you'd like that, RJ. You're probably one of the few people in the chat who knows who Mark Jindrak is. Who is his partner? Sean O'Hare, right? It was Jindrak and O'Hare, right? I'm also horrible at saying Jindrak. That's such a tongue twister. Good comment from Roy. Roy says, which is better at deep safety, Rapp or Bishop? It's tough. So I'm kind of speak out of both sides of my mouth. Both, kind of. Rapp is a better processor who takes better angles to the football. Bishop isn't as good of a processor, but he's more athletic and has more range and has more better juice and has more better juice and has better juice and athleticism to make plays. But if you don't have the processing and the angles to the ball, all that athleticism and juice isn't necessarily the most valuable. For what it's worth, early on in camp, when they've been going to single high safety looks, Bishop has been the single high post safety in both cover 1 and cover 3. We started to see that tweak a little bit going forward, but Bishop has predominantly been the deep safety. Whether that's going to happen and stay come regular season, or if they're just trying to get him a ton of time on task in that realm now because he doesn't have a lot of time on task in that realm, we'll see. But it's tough. In an ideal world, Bishop is your post safety or your deep safety from a single eye perspective. But it's also, again, it's tough because he's got to be there from a processing and an angle standpoint and a reading of the game standpoint, but he's also more athletic to man cover tight ends and running backs close to the line of scrimmage than Rapp is. So it's a bit wonky. And then from a split field look, I think both are fine from a split field perspective. Rapp has still proven time and time again that he can function from a coverage world and from a run fit world as a deep safety and a 2 high look. So I'm not, worried about the 2 high pieces, but single high, it's a little A, little a B, like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Even to what Lou says here, probably going to got to say Rapp for now simply because he's done the job at the NFL level, but both and neither. That's exactly right. Both, but also neither. Yeah, that's where we're at. Another competition, again, so I know there's several position battles and competitions across the roster, but I wanted to touch on corner. I wanted to touch on safety briefly. And then one that I think is really interesting is tight end. Dawson Knox placed on the non-football injury list to start training camp, which essentially means he got hurt working out on his own. I think he tweaked his hamstring working out or doing something. So we have not seen him in camp at all. So he's been out every day. And then Kincaid missed a day. That has given Zach Davidson and Jackson Hawes a lot of reps with the ones. Even Reggie Gilliam as well, who's gotten work as a tight end and, in added looks where maybe they would go 12, but instead they're going to go 21 personnel and put Gilliam out on the field. But kind of focusing on Hawes, a lot of reps with the ones for him. His blocking has really stood out. I noted it each day in practice, like just It sounds different when he hits pads and individual and in drills. Like he's got pop in his hands and some shock. He really like looks to hit and latch on to guys and drive and people move. And then you see it in the team portions as well. I noted, especially him and Reggie Gilliam front side on run blocks. They're just people moving all day and creating displacement, both at the first level on the defensive line and then climbing up to the second level. They are just creating alleys and gaps for running backs to run through. Like Hawes is really just a prototypical. You want to run zone to his side. You want to run duo. Well, you're always running duo to the tight end side, but you want him as the tight end on duo, whether he's in line or even as an insert guy. He's done a really good job blocking. And the thing that I want to keep mentioning, I don't think Jackson Hawes is a plus, receiving threat as a tight end. I don't think he's Sam Laporta. I don't think he's Trey McBride. I don't think, he's not Dalton Kincaid. He's not even Dawson Knox, right? I don't think he has that, but he is functional and athletic enough with enough, explosive type of movements that he can be a pass catching threat from 0 to 10 yards. You can send him on a little drag route. You can send him on an OTB route over the ball or a sit route in the middle of the field. You can put him on a little dig in the low intermediate. He is not some, cumbersome, feet moving like they're stuck in cement bricks type of tight end. Even though he is a blocking first guy and more of a physical presence than he is an athletic presence, he can move enough to be a threat as a pass catcher. I really like what he's shown. I'm very excited to see him in the preseason. Alex Brasky, beat reporter, did a really nice piece today, I think for Sports Illustrated, where he spoke to Connor McGovern, and Connor McGovern had multiple comments about so close to not saying Spencer Hawes. Jackson Hawes. Brasky did a piece, and Connor McGovern spoke multiple times on how good of a blocker Jackson Hawes has been and the difference that he's made. And again, as was foretold in the prophecy, everybody and their mother was like, man, what could he bring as a blocker? It's going to be really interesting to see him in this offense. But while I think he has shown that potential and that capability, and tight ends coach Rob Boris has been doing a lot of work with him, constantly coaching him up, praising him when he needs it, but constantly giving him feedback to improve. I really do expect him to make this team as tight end 3, and I do expect him to be used in packages more so than Quentin Morris was, and even maybe to supplement the loss of a Mac Hollins and give them some functionality in certain looks and packages, formations, and alignments that you might not be able to get with Dalton Kincaid as the second tight end there. But the big thing for me, again, while all that is understood and kind of the bar is set there, I do think he's somewhat underrated as a pass catcher. Again, not underrated in the terms of like, everybody's sleeping on him. This is a 1,000-yard tight end waiting in the wings, but he is someone that can get out to the flat, can leak out, can run a drag, and potentially run away from some guys. And then because he is a bigger dude, he can break an arm tackle or two and kind of get forward a little bit. So he's just not just he's a statue and he's a run blocking guy only. I don't think he's this dual threat tight end, but he's a plus run blocker, and he's functional enough as a pass catcher that you can go into 12 personnel and he can still be a threat and allow you to live in the light and the dark and access more of that menu without having to turn the page. So those are the big, position battles for me. Corner, starting at the top with Hairston and Trey, but overall just going to be an absolute dogfight. Safety looks like it's Bishop's job to lose, and then tight end. And even Davidson has shown some flashes as well. I just think his skill set, he's more like Dalton Kincaid light, and I think that is already a role that is a bit unique. He's a better blocker than Kincaid, probably. So I just think it makes things a little wonky for him, but he's been getting a lot of opportunity. And again, as has Reggie Gilliam, which I am very, very, very excited for. Lou says, how we always have 17 tight ends I want to carry on the 53 is beyond me. Roy says, would you say that Hawes is more of a throwback type tight end? Yeah, I would say he's more of the kind of your more traditional, like inline type of tight end guy who can move on a double team with a tackle and, move a defensive end or an edge player, climb up to the second climb up to the second level and seal a linebacker, absolutely murk a safety or a corner or a nickel. I do think he's more of a throwback type tight end, but he does have enough athleticism too. He's not like a full spread tight end, but he can do enough where in today's NFL, where offenses are trying to go condensed and they're trying to access as much of the play calling menu without having to turn the page as possible, I do think he's a good fit for modern football, even though he is more of a throwback type tight end, if that makes sense. Lou says they may not be sexy, but Tyler Conklins are fine. That is true. Comment here from Rockwell saying, Hawes reminds me of Nate Geary. Great on the radio, but can come in and hold for field goals if you need him. But I'd rather have him on the radio. Yeah, I was there to see it live and in person between Reed Ferguson and Nate Geary. 5 years worth of trash talking and taunts come to fruition. It was fantastic. Charles says, I want to see more screen game to running backs and tight ends, especially Knox. Very fair. John says, is Hawes better than Lee Smith? I haven't seen him take a real NFL snap yet, so I always want to say it with a grain of salt. I do think he's more of a pass catching threat. I think he's got a little more explosion to him than Lee Smith. And yeah, I think he's a bit more of a mauler. So I would say so. Yes. But again, he's never taken an NFL snap yet. So we'll kind of see. I have not seen. Lou, I see your question here. I have not noticed too much. I'm going through some of my notes now. Yeah, no, I haven't seen too much for Kelly. I never even try to pronounce the last name because I can never get it correct. But no, honestly, I haven't seen much from a wide receiver perspective in general throughout camp. I have somebody that I'm going to talk about as we go forward. But to your point, I know he's super buried and done the roster shuffle. We'll see in the preseason. There's going to be an opportunity for a lot of these receivers to show out a little bit in the preseason, so we'll see. Lou says, hey, that in and of itself is an answer. Yeah, receiver, I went in being like, oh, I want to see receivers. Ironically, or maybe not, I was super annoyed. Usually wide receiver corner one-on-ones are on that first Sunday. They weren't. They were yesterday on Monday, so I missed it, which annoyed the hell out of me. But no, I haven't seen too much. Receivers in general, there were a couple pieces I noted, but I found the receivers overall kind of a bit lackluster, except for a couple, not just for Kelly's sake. Again, I'm not going to try to pronounce the last name because I always butcher it. So yeah, that's from a battle perspective. I know there's a couple others, but I think those are the real main. I think corner is the main battle position in general, not just Trey and Hairston, but across the board. And then tight end's going to be really interesting because Dawson Knox has an injury history. And if he continues to get banged up, my initial thought coming into the year was like, oh man, I wonder if Jackson Hawes takes some snaps away from Kincaid and it's Hawes and Knox out there. Now I'm sitting here thinking, is Knox not going to get healthy? And is it going to be Hawes and Kincaid out there, or Gilliam or Davidson potentially? Like, it's interesting. Lou throwing out the phonics there of how to pronounce that last name. I'm still not even going to try to attempt it out of respect and not to butcher it, but I appreciate the hell out of you, Lou, and I appreciate your confidence. All right. Next piece that I want to talk about. We alluded to it a bit with Max Hairston, but I do want to touch on some of the injuries that we've seen. Again, if Hairston's out for any significant amount of time, whether it's the full year or it's like, oh, he's out for a month or 2 months or whatever, or he's going to miss all the preseason, anything that causes him to miss anything more than a week, I think really just kind of solidifies and signifies that Trey White is going to lock down that CB2 spot. Again, no jinx, fingers crossed, all that kind of stuff. I think Trey is ahead of Max right now, even if they were both healthy and there were no injuries. And again, that's not because Hairston is terrible. And that isn't a horrible thing because, Trey is washed. So the fact that he's ahead means the Bills' corners are screwed, yada, yada. It doesn't mean any of that. Trey has, like we talked about earlier, Trey has looked good. Max has looked good. Max has just had more inconsistency than Trey has, which is to be expected. Oh, I moved too much and threw the camera out of focus, which is to be expected given Trey's familiarity, experience, Max's lack thereof, so on and so forth, all those things. But I do think, again, Trey was already going to push Max for the spot and was already getting the lion's share and got more of the lion's share of starters reps as each day has passed at camp. So if Max misses any time or has any type of hindrances, it just furthers that even further. Yeah, that's not incorrect verbiage. Another one, Spencer Brown, back injury. We still don't know the severity. Beane talked about it on day one, kind of it being more precautionary and, guys know their bodies, yada, yada, all that kind of coach and GM speak. I am worried because anytime I see a back injury come back for a guy who's had issues with his back his first 3 years in the league, I find that troublesome. But we'll see the type of severity for him going forward. But his injury has given Tylen Grable and Ryan Vandermark, both of those guys, opportunities to work with the ones. And I want to see. It's been tough. All the days that I was there were no pads. They had shells on Sunday, and it's really hard for me. Not necessarily hard, but I just don't like to evaluate trench work when there's no pads on. So, I think overall, I think Grable, in terms of snap share, they're actually close because Vandermark started to get more throughout the week. But Spencer Brown being out has really given Ryan Vandermark and Tylen Grable the opportunity to kind of work at right tackle. Grable has also gotten work at left tackle. He looks to be more of the swing guy, whereas Vandermark I always thought was better at left than he was right. But then he showed some niceness at right tackle when he filled in for Spencer Brown last year, famously on the final couple drives against Kansas City in the regular season. But I thought Grable was one of the, shining stars of the preseason last year and made the team. The length, the athleticism, the potential development you have in and of that. And I do think the offensive line is interesting to note because next year, after this season, Connor McGovern's a UFA, David Edwards is a UFA. So are you potentially trying to rebuild that offensive line? Are you trying to kick maybe someone into guard at some point? Is Alec Anderson going to be next up at guard or center, and then Grable becomes the sixth offensive lineman, or however it is? But at the very least, Grable and Vandermark look to be your guys that if Spencer Brown misses any time, it's going to be one of those two dudes at right tackle, and the preseason will go a long way towards solidifying that. Again, I watched them in spurts. I'm not really trying to evaluate trench play when there's no pads on because it counts, but it also kind of doesn't for me. But that's just me. So yeah, a good mix for both Grable and Ryan Vandermark with the ones at right tackle. Linebackers, I think, is interesting as well. Dorian Williams has been banged up. Terrell Bernard has been banged up. That has given Balen Spector, Shaq Thompson, and Joe Andreessen all semblances of opportunity with the ones and the twos at linebacker. Each of them kind of working with each other at the one spot and at the two spot, rotating in and out with Matt Milano with the ones. So it's interesting to kind of see how that's played out. They've all got an opportunity. Shaq Thompson has made a couple nice plays. I know the injury concerns, and on tape last year, I didn't love his tape even before the injury. Like, you can tell there's a lot of mileage on the tires, and he doesn't move so great anymore from a lower body perspective. But for better or for worse, he's multiple times throughout camp, I have not been looking for him, and he just seems to be in the right place at the right time, making a play on the ball or dropping deep enough in coverage that the quarterback has to try and put it over him, and it allows a corner or a safety to make a play on the ball. We kind of think we know at this point what we have in Spector, or maybe not, because he's been banged up a bit as well. I know Andreessen would be a huge fan favorite for a lot of folks, but the camp in the preseason is going to do a lot for someone at linebacker. There is a vacuum of power at linebacker that someone is going to grab, especially if these injuries still continue. And even, Bernard's had some injury pieces throughout his career. Dorian has been banged up a little throughout his career. Milano has been banged up a little throughout his career. So there's an opportunity like all three of those guys could end up seeing some reps at some point, or Ulafoshio comes through. The linebacker position, I think, is going to be interesting because I don't think, whether they're hurt or not, I don't think you're going to see a lot of Milano or Bernard in the preseason. Dorian Williams will kind of see. So you're going to get a lot of opportunities for Balen Spector, Shaq Thompson, and Joe Andreessen at those linebacker spots in the preseason. And if these injuries continue in camp, they're going to get a lot of those reps in camp as well. And then again, we'll kind of see what does, Ulafoshio be, or maybe even, Jenkins does something, but it'll be interesting. I think it's more from a depth perspective and from a special teams perspective, but we've seen the past several years, Balen Spector has seen real reps for this defense. Dorian Williams has seen real reps for this defense when he wasn't supposed to. So we're kind of going into almost the third consecutive year where the Bills have had injuries at the linebacker spot. We know from recent experience, those, your linebacker 3, linebacker 4, maybe even linebacker 5, cough, cough, AJ Klein coming off the couch and leaving vacation to come start in a playoff game. We know that those dudes can kind of come out of nowhere and have to play meaningful snaps. And there is a bit of, I think, a vacuum of, power that can be seized by one of those guys. So we're going to see a lot of Balen Spector, Shaq Thompson, and Joe Andrews. And I think they've each flashed in their own way, but the preseason is going to go the longest way towards really kind of solidifying that battle. Also, from a wide receiver perspective, the wide receiver injuries, Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore, Caden Prather, Tyrell Shavers went down Sunday. He was starting to get some work with the ones and actually looked pretty good. KJ Hamler missed some time today, but it was more just due to a heat illness than anything. I think for the wide receivers, everything that we've seen creates two opportunities, I think, at the top and at the bottom. Obviously, it creates an opportunity at the bottom of the depth chart. If guys like Elijah Moore and Tyrell Shavers, I would say those two coming into camp were the leaders in the clubhouse to be wide receiver 5 if the Bills were going to keep 5. I think Moore and Shavers were right there. I would probably put Moore ahead of Shavers, but both those guys missing any time. Then on top of that, Curtis Samuel missing time. So you've got opportunities at the bottom of the depth chart, but because Samuel is also missing time, you're getting more reps for Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer at the top of the depth chart to lock down those spots. So the wide receiver injuries, in terms of how they're impacting the depth chart and the roster, you're getting a lot of time on task for Keon Coleman, which he needs because he is green and a raw player. It's getting a lot of time on task for Josh Palmer, which is good because he's new to this offense and new to this system. You don't really need more time on task for Shakir. Shakir is what Shakir is, but it's given a lot of opportunity for Palmer and Keon to kind of lock down, 2 of the top 3 wide receiver spots. And then it's also creating more battle opportunities at the bottom. Maybe someone like Jalen Virgil starts to emerge in some way. Maybe KJ Hamler shakes off the heat illness that he had today and he starts to make an attempt somewhere. Maybe it's Deion Kane. Maybe Laviska Shenault comes around. I know he's a huge favorite of Drew from the Rock Pile Report. Feel free to tweet at Drew from the Rock Pile Report. He loves Laviska Shenault. He's got multiple Laviska jerseys. Absolutely loves him. So, yeah. The wide receiver is interesting. We're going to see, and this is already a position, right? Like, we're not going to see a ton of Palmer in the preseason. We're not going to see a ton of Curtis Samuel. We're not going to see a ton of Khalil Shakir. We'll probably get a decent chunk of Keon Coleman because he needs time on task, but Coleman and Moore and Shavers and Prather and Hamler and Virgil and all these guys, even Stephen Gosnell, who made a really nice catch today, like all these dudes were going to get a lot of work in the preseason. And now with the injuries we've seen at the receiver, that just pushes this even further. So wide receiver is one to keep an eye on from the injuries. Again, impacting 2 spots on the depth chart. The bottom in terms of who wide receiver 5 is, but also at the top in terms of kind of creating further separation. If you are the Bills, I think in an ideal world, Palmer's going to see a lot of snaps. Shakir's going to see a lot of snaps, but you're hoping that Keon Coleman was going to take that jump and really kind of be wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, depending on how you view Khalil Shakir as being a true wide receiver 1, even though he's more of a slot guy and how he's used. But conversation for another time. That's kind of been forced on the Bills within camp because it's not like, oh, okay, well, we want to work in Samuel and we want to work in these other guys. Like, no, like Keon Coleman's getting a ton of burn because Samuel's been banged up a bit. Now Moore's banged up and everything kind of stacks. So wide receiver, I think, is an interesting one for the overall battle, but more so because of the injuries impacting the roster and the depth chart and how that's going to kind of shake out a bit. Can go back and go through some of the comments. Yeah, Roy says Superman Deion Kane is back, 2-time UFL champion, 1-time MVP. Welcome to the practice squad. Maybe that's fair. Upstate Gardner says Spencer Brown's back is worrisome, but I'm a Grable stan. Cromer can develop the dude. I don't want anything to happen to the offensive line. I don't want them to change in any way, shape, or form. I want this starting 5 this year and for the next couple of years, but I second the notion of kind of, in Cromer we trust. And Grable's got a lot of fun traits and tools. And again, he looked really good in the preseason last year. Him having a quality snatch trap and him using it with regularity was a big surprise to me. And he was one of my stars last year of the preseason from week 1 to 2 to 3. And he got better from week 1 to 2 to 3. And I trust in Aaron Cromer. So I think that's fair. Ralph says, with the lone Granger, I like this nickname for Cedric Van Pran Granger. Who else is taking snaps at center? My eye hasn't been, again, too much on the O-line because of the trench pieces, but Jacob Bayer has been getting there. I remember seeing 61 a bunch. I think Alec Anderson's been getting some work there as well. But Bayer is one that comes to my mind a lot. But again, I haven't been too trench focused. I'm going to be trench focused more during the scrimmage on Friday. But yeah. Jordan 716 says Shaq baby is going to play hard for McDermott. I don't doubt it. If anybody's going to get the best out of him, and if there is somebody that Shaq's going to give his all for, it would probably be McDermott. Not to say he's not a professional and wouldn't give his all no matter what. I'm, again, trying to cover all avenues here before someone yells at me. RJ saying Deion Kane is a perfect practice squad player. Dominic says, oh my God, enough with the wrestling. Man, you got to come around. Wrestling is a sport. It's tremendous, but to each their own. I appreciate you, Don. Thank you. John says, how is Balen Spector not in the rash of injuries we have right now? I feel like you shouldn't have even said that. I shouldn't have even brought up this comment because knowing that the wind's going to blow hard in Rochester and he's going to pick up an injury tonight. Yeah. Also, yeah, Dom, blame RJ. It's RJ's fault with the wrestling. If I see RJ in here, I'm pretty much guaranteed to make a wrestling comment. And RJ's in here pretty much every single week. So that means I'm pretty much guaranteed to make a wrestling comment every single week. Upstate Gardner said, did Bishop go to the injury tent today? Yes, he did. I think he went in before Hairston. No, after Hairston. I think, yeah, after Hairston. I didn't hear anything conclusive or worrisome. I think he went back to practice, finished the rest, but he did go into the injury tent. There were like 7 or 8 guys that went into the injury tent today. So, Marino's Legacy says, Brandon Beane hasn't drafted an immediate star in the first year since Trey White. I'm concerned about the evaluation process. Maybe Greg Rousseau in year 1, but that's pushing it. I think that's fair, but I also think what's tough is they really haven't had a lot of opportunities to draft like stars at the spots in the first round where you usually get stars. Usually you're getting stars in the top 15, top 20. The only one who they've had in that range was Ed Oliver, who I don't think is a star, but has become a very good player. I think Ed Oliver's been solid. I think Greg Rousseau has the opportunity to become a true edge 1 this year, although I don't think he's holistically that this year because he's still more of a 2 as a pass rusher than a 1. So I do think this comment is somewhat fair, but I also think working against Beane is the fact that he's usually drafting in the late 20s. Now, you can sit there and be like, well, yeah, but the Chiefs got, McDuffie in the late 20s, and he's a star. So you can play both sides of it, but I do think drafting in the far back of round 1 traditionally doesn't necessarily lend itself towards getting, an immediate star. Usually you're going to get more role players or like high quality guys in positions. And I think they've gotten that more often than not. But yeah, I do think he's hit more on the back end of drafts. Like, look where you got Shakir. Look where you got Taron Johnson. Look where you got Christian Benford. I think he's hit more on the back end, especially on day 3. Like rounds 4 through 6, I think have been better for him than rounds 1 through 3, ironically. So I push back a little, but I do think that's fair. Oh, and then follow comment for you said, but his picks usually round out as solid to very good, but rarely as a rookie. Yeah, I think it's fair. He's got a weird. This is a larger conversation. I don't want to get too off track with it, but I think a lot of it is due to the type of the archetypes that they draft at certain positions and the needs that they have at those positions. So they tend to almost kind of chase their tail, and it's not like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results, but that's essentially what they kind of do. They kind of stick to the routine, but the results stay the same, which is why we're kind of in this rinse and repeat scenario of like, solid to very good, but no stars. And then also factoring in is because they're drafting in the back half of round 1. And then rarely as a rookie is fair, but also they're usually a pretty good football team. So it's hard for a rookie to kind of crack the roster because usually they have some kind of talent or depth at a majority of spots already. But yeah, I do think that is a fair comment. Overall, yeah, K. Morris is the same thing. Hard to get year 1 stars when you're consistently drafting in the mid to late 20s. Man, what I would do to go back for McDuffie. It's tough. It's tough. Oh, man. It's so funny to see. I swear I don't see the comments ahead of time as I start reading things from people. But it's funny to see like the comments. I'm seeing people mention McDuffie and Trey, and then, the piece of like, oh, yeah, mid to late 20s, so on and so forth. I forgot. Good call here as I kept going through Milano. But I don't think Milano was taken in the McDermott, Doug Whaley draft. And then Doug Whaley got fired like 2 months later and Brandon Beane came in. Now we can play the game of like, was Beane kind of the shadow GM? Did he already have his hand in the pot a little bit, so on and so forth? But yeah, that was not a Beane pick. Whaley did that draft, and then I think got fired like 2 months later or something like that, and Beane took over, if I remember that correctly. And yeah, actually, even that too, I don't think Beane drafted Trey White either, if I remember correctly. Oh, and John said that in the chat too. Yeah, I think that might be that. Fair. And even just again too, like if we're talking about like, I'm more concerned with the rookies not developing into true stars than I am them having impact as a rookie. Like I'm less concerned with like, man, this guy's not a stud as a rookie, because I don't know how many rookie studs there are anyway, especially if you're not picking in like the top 10, or unless somebody falls to you outside the top 10, like Jalen Carter or something like that. But my thing is more of getting guys to being elite. I don't care when it happens. If they're elite in year one, fantastic. If it's year 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, that's also good. But I don't think the Bills throughout this Josh Allen run, I don't think they've had enough elite talent around him that they've either acquired or that they've drafted and developed. I think Benford is getting to that point now, and I think Rousseau has the opportunity to get there if he can, again, like I've said so much on the show, if he can take a jump as a pass rusher, I think he could potentially get there. But yeah, it's been hit or miss. And again, it depends on how you define elite. But I think at times, like Taron Johnson, who's been elite, Matt Milano's been elite. The safeties, I mean, they've had the best safety tandem in football. At one point, you had Stephon Diggs, but it was all kind of like mixing and matching at different points. And then if you're talking about just drafting, again, a lot of those guys that I mentioned were more, Poyer was a signing, Hyde was a signing. Granted, they developed both of them and helped turn them into some things. But, Stephon Diggs was a trade acquisition. So we'll see in terms of, the elite piece that they develop. But yeah, I'm less concerned about like elite players as a rookie, especially considering this is usually a team that isn't like, man, they need an elite rookie to contribute. They're a team that usually goes to the Final Four every year, or the divisional round of the playoffs. So they're a good team, usually with not a lot of holes. And they usually do their best to hedge their bets going into the draft. So if they have a need at corner, they usually sign a couple corners. So that way there's some competition. If they have a need at defensive end, they'll sign a couple and then still draft one. So it's not like any rookie's going to be a plug and play guy anyway, because one, they're usually a good at most spots anyway, but two, they're going to bring guys in free agency to hedge their bets, so they're not left with some glaring hole and forced into a need come draft time. Mori says, Beane's round one preferences seem to be traitsy guys that have uber high potential. Yeah, I do think they're more trait based, and I also get like, they just go to their archetype. Like they like defensive ends that don't really have a ton of change of direction or athleticism. They want length and power and pocket compression, which is fair. But I think those guys tend to be more limited in general with what they can be, even though they also have high potential and may take a while. It is very interesting. This is a comment, I think this comment too from Red Sand, saying the quality of depth is a direct result of their drafting profile. I think they also go for a lot of the guys that are high floor, and I think that's part of the reason they have their depth. For as much as I think they've lacked through like A tier elite talent, they seem to always have a bunch of like C+ or B- guys at positions, like at the third or fourth guy on the depth chart, when most teams have like a D or even an F there. Like they have survived injuries at a multitude of spots for years because they develop well. And they usually, again, they take guys usually with high floors. Dane Jackson's a good example, right? Like he was never going to be this great CB2, but he's kind of, a high floor CB2. He can get the job done. He's more of a CB3 or a CB4, but if you need him to fill in and kind of do something, especially if you've got, an all-pro Trey White, and then Hyde and Poyer playing along with him, and all-pro Taron Johnson, like that guy fits that need well. It's all the chess piecery of all of it. But yeah, I do think this comment stands that the quality of depth, I think, is a direct result of their drafting profile. They go for culture guys, high floor guys, known quantity type of dudes, and then maybe they'll take some more swings in the early rounds, and they kind of battle it all together. Great comment here from Marino's Legacy. When you are in high leverage situations, guys like Chris Jones and Jamar Chase are the difference. I don't disagree. Pete says, I'm all for more elite guys. I don't see round one rookies who are immediately impactful as the route you must take to get there. I think this is very well said, and I agree. Good comment here from Marino's Legacy saying if Walker or Sanders are game-wrecking defensive tackles, it changes the equation dramatically regardless of Hairston. I think they can be as rushers. I'm more worried about each of them getting blown off the ball and being liabilities versus the run. But we'll see. We will see. Oh, I forgot Gabe Davis as a draft pick. Yeah. Even like Levi Wallace as an undrafted free agent and them getting like CB2 mileage out of him for a couple years as a high floor guy. Like they just find ways with UDFAs in the back end of round one. Like, yeah, they just find a way. Oh, hi, Lauren. I like this. I have nothing to note to add. Just wanted to say hi, Aunt. Hi, Lauren. I hope you're doing well. Taron Johnson, too. Yeah, Taron Johnson. Oh, Taron Johnson was a round 4 guy. Johnson was 4. Shakir was a 5th. Benford was a 6th. Those ones stick out in my mind. Yeah, those ones stick out in my mind the most. Want to talk about some stock up and stock down pieces regarding the training camp. I like this conversation in the chat, though. Feel free to continuously talk about it. I'll continue to bring things up. I'm going to take a drink. I'm saying that for the audio people because they're going to hear some silence. And if I didn't acknowledge it, you'll see me taking a drink, but they'd be like, oh, why is there silence? So let's talk up some stock up and stock down. Trey White, stock up. Don't need to talk about it too much. I talked about him throughout this episode. Stock up big time. Again, I thought he would be a really nice CB3. Him flashing some CB2 pieces, I think is nice. Oh, actually, hold on real quick. Buffadelphia says, random. How would you compare Douglas last year to Trey's performance in camp this year? Man, it's tough to say right now because I haven't seen live bullets and live reps. I will say I think Douglas was still the better force player and better run defender. I think Trey has shown better short area burst and quickness and coverage chops. But I didn't really see those struggles from Rasul Douglas in camp. I started to see them as the season progressed. I don't know if he had an injury or the mileage just really started to show. So I think Trey's performance overall has been very, very, very encouraging. I think he showed more short area burst and quickness, but Douglas still looked good in camp last year. It was more just, yeah, as K. Morty said, and John, both of you guys saying in the chat there, yeah, Douglas, it was more as kind of the season progressed. It was almost literally like he fell off a cliff, and I have no idea what happened. But Trey looks good. And I thought, Douglas, which you could play devil's advocate and be like, well, if Douglas looked good last year and he fell off a cliff, what's to say Trey won't? And I don't have an answer for you, so hopefully he doesn't. I'm not saying you're saying that, but just want to put that out there. All right, stock up, stock down. Good comments. Good thought provoking questions and comments in the chat tonight. I like it. So stock up, Trey White. My next stock up. I don't think this is, oh yeah, of course, Buffadelphia. I appreciate the comment and thank you for being here and joining me live. I think it's very nice anytime people join and comment. It's a good time. Then my next stock up, I don't think it's going to be, it might be, this person seems polarizing. And I don't know if it's just because people are loud and vocal all the time because Twitter is a cesspool for that or not, but I'm going to give a stock up to Keon Coleman. I hope nobody yells at me for that. I mean, you can yell. I don't care. Teach their own. I do think the inconsistency is going to still be present in this game. I know on, what was it? Let's say I went to camp day 1 and day 2. I did not go on day 3. I know he had some drops on day 3, which was Friday. But I thought overall, at least the days I've been there, he's looked good. He's had good timing and rapport with Josh Allen, getting to the spots where Allen expects him to be, getting out of his break right when Allen is anticipating him getting out of his break, separating at the catch point on some deep throws, separating at the catch point on some back shoulder throws against man coverage, being able to find space in zone, especially on the seams and the intermediate. I talked about on day 2 on that Thursday. He had an outbreaking route. I caught it late, so I don't remember exactly what the concept was or even the coverage piece, but I'm pretty sure it was either quarters or it was cover 6 with quarters to that side. But he bends this outbreaker route, but he bends it inside. He stems it inside, and Taylor Rapp starts to go with him. And right as Rapp opens up inside to run with him, Coleman breaks down and snaps it off and pops back outside, snatches Rapp's ankles. Rapp falls to the ground. Keon's wide open. Allen pins it on him. I think he's had a strong start to camp. I do think his stock is up. He's beaten a variety of guys in coverage. He's had some struggles with Christian Benford, but everybody has had their struggles with Christian Benford. Christian Benford is another stock up candidate. Benford has been, I don't have too much to add for Benford other than he's just been locked down against anyone and everyone in a variety of coverages. It's tough to beat Christian Benford in any way, shape, or form this camp so far to start. But I think Keon has looked good. I do think we're going to continue to see inconsistencies with his game. We're going to continue to see peaks and valleys. As I mentioned earlier, and as everybody and their mother has mentioned at this point, he is green, he is raw in terms of his age, in terms of football experience, pro style stuff, all of that, right? So it's going to take him time on task to get better. He needs time on task. I'm sure there's going to be games in season where he has like 8 catches on 9 targets for 110 yards and a touchdown or 2, and everybody's like, whew, he's arrived. And then the next week he might have like 1 catch on 3 targets for 7 yards. And everybody's like, oh no, he sucks again. Like, what happened? That's who he's going to be. We are not going to know who Keon Coleman is in year 2. Keon Coleman is the type of player where we're not going to know who he is until year 3 or year 4, or honestly, maybe even beyond. The example I always give, and if you're a regular listener or viewer of this show, you already know what I'm going to say. The example I always give, because Keon Coleman was my wide receiver 9 coming out last year, but I thought he had the widest array of potential NFL outcomes. If you told me he ended up being a high-end wide receiver 2 or low-end wide receiver 1 in his career, I'd buy it. If you told me he was out of the league in 4 or 5 years, I'd buy it. If you told me he was living off of 1-year contracts into his early 30s because nobody tapped into his skill set, but each team kept being like, we can be the ones to finally reach him, I could buy that. We're not going to know who he is. Even if he balls out in camp in the preseason in the first couple weeks, there's a chance he could fall right back down, and vice versa. He could look like crap to start the year and then rise up. We're not going to know who Keon Coleman is until year 3, or honestly, maybe even year 4, which I know isn't a great answer for a lot of folks because you want your guy who's the first pick in the draft, even though it did come in the second round. You want that guy to be an immediate contributor for any type of team, but especially one that's trying to get over the hump and win a championship. But I do think there's something to be said for drafting guys with an athletic profile or a skill set that you don't have and you want, even if it may take him a little more time on task, or if he requires a little more seasoning or simmering to kind of develop into the player that you want, especially if you're strong enough as a team or a culture already and you have the ecosystem that can allow them to develop. And I do think the Bills have that. They're a good running football team. They have a good offensive line. No jinx, fingers crossed. You have the MVP at quarterback. You've got enough weapons at the receiver and tight end spots to insulate Keon Coleman. So I do think he has the opportunity to succeed, but I do think he's a stock up candidate right now, even though, again, he had some drops on day 3, but he's been winning with physicality. He's been separating at the catch point and finding space and zone and being able to snap some things off. Again, I think the biggest thing, and everybody knows at this point, can he separate consistently? What can he do in his route stem? What can he do in terms of the technical pieces and the refinement pieces of a wide receiver? That's going to come. He's not going to go from year 1 to year 2 and be this great professional route runner. That's going to continue to take time, which is why I think it's more of a year 3, year 4 type of thing for Keon Coleman. I talked about Christian Benford. He's looked great. I don't have anything else. He's awesome. Also a stock up. This is more of a schematic thing. Talked about Ryan Nielsen's impact and the desire for this Bills team to kind of change some things up front. So a stock up is 5-man pressure looks, simulated pressures, creeper pressures, but also just the defense being more adjustable and sound in their checks and assignments based off of shifts, motions, and changes in formation and alignment. So I noted multiple times on camps. I tweeted it. I posted it on Blue Sky. Bobby Babich and the defense have, they're taking the defense and they're taking the starters and they're purely going over adjustments and checks based off of changes in formation, alignment, shifts, and motion. They are going over their checks. So if it goes from a 2x2 to a 3x1, if it does that with a shift, or if it does that with a jet motion or an orbit motion or a shift, what their checks are, what the coverage changes, what the front changes. They did that multiple days. They've been tying that in terms of being assignment sound with man and different man and match coverages. Then they've also been drilling down 5-man pressure looks, different simulated pressures, and different creeper pressures. Also some 6-man pressure looks as well. So I like what I've seen from that. So a stock up in terms of the potential tweaks and changes that we want to see from this defense, which is more non-4-man rushes, whether non-traditional like a sim or a creeper or actual like 5 and 6 man pressures. So seeing more of that, seeing more man and match coverage on the back end and being really sound and sound is actually the only way to put it in their checks, their adjustments, and their assignments after they see motion, after they see a shift, areas where they've struggled in the past and they've kind of been out leveraged in different points. So those are big stock ups for me. There's been a couple more, but I didn't want to give like a list of like 10. So those are big 4 for me. Want to go back and grab some comments. Red Sand saying stock up is the new tight end. Might be a Gronk style player. Not sure of his hands. Yeah, I mean, Gronk was plus as a receiver and as a blocker. I think it's a very high hope and expectation for Jackson Hawes. He is a stock up for me as well, but I talked about him earlier in terms of just playing well, so I didn't necessarily include him here, but fair point. Dorian Strong. I see that from Jordan. I see that from Charles. I think he's had some good flashes. He's also gotten beat from time to time, I would say a handful of positive and a handful of negative. So I kind of keep him as a neutral. He's another guy that I'm looking forward to seeing in the scrimmage, but also big time in the preseason. I think he's going to get a lot of burn. Buff Bills 83 says, any update on Hairston? Not officially as of now. We talked about him earlier in the episode, but there's been no news in terms of trickling down of, confirmed this injury, confirmed no injury, nothing at this point. Oh, John says Coleman needs to get rid of that 0 number. It's brutal to look at. I don't know how I feel about the 0. I'm okay with it, but I also don't like it because I don't think it looks good with the Bills font. That's my bigger thing. I don't think the 0 looks great with the Bills font, but I'm not opposed to the 0. Kebby says Captain McDuffie opposite of Benford. I think about it all the time. He was my corner 3 or corner 4 in that draft. I loved him. I wanted him really bad for the Bills. I thought he could play outside, not just inside. Yeah, he was a big hope for me. I really, 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 really wanted McDuffie, but it wasn't meant to be. What else? Upstate Gardner says, I like Keon lining up inside more. Yeah, I do too, but I just think it limits some of the things that you can do. But fair. Upstate Gardner says, Palmer's ability to create versus man has me stoked. It was clear this regime wanted a separator for Josh. Yeah, underneath and the intermediate, low to mid intermediate, I think he's going to be a real advantageous piece in terms of separation. He can win at the release point. He can win in his route stem. He can win on the break. He can run a variety of routes. He's got really good deception, body language, and pacing in his routes. I think he's going to be an asset. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a true wide receiver 1, but I think he's going to be a difference maker in this offense. However, you want to quantify it. Buff Bills 83 says, if we even just have more of a threat of a downfield passing game, that will open things up. Absolutely. And part of that is Josh Allen being better on throws of 20 or more yards. He's been poor the past couple of seasons. I also think they need to use the play action game to create some explosives. That just seems like an easy way to do it, considering how good their run game is, and play action being a nice way to create some additional separation for yourself and some explosives and being able to attack downfield or even in the intermediate with some, run after catch potential. I think they do need to kind of create more, take the top off, chunk plays downfield to be able to loosen things up. Because if they're just living as a run the football team and living in the underneath to lower mid intermediate, eventually things are going to start to constrict. And if you're playing teams with better athletes at corner or good corners, teams are just trying to man you up and play single high, and they're going to start to struggle like they did against Baltimore and Houston last year. Charles says, Jordan Hancock getting reps only at safety and none at slot corner? No, both. Day 1, he was the slot corner with the third team, his first time on the field, and then they ran him back and he was at safety. So I've been seeing him get work at both. Jordan says, how does Frank Gore Jr. look? Did he beef up at all? I would say maybe he looks maybe a little heavier, but I think kind of the same. Red Sand is a big Ray Davis fan. Can't wait to see him get the ball more. Love watching him run the ball. James says, is Jackson injured? Do you mean Landon Jackson or Dane Jackson? Because there's 2. I guess I'll answer both. Jane Jackson's been getting burned and some runs, so I don't think he's hurt. Landon Jackson didn't really see snaps on day 1, but I think he's been fine going forward and seeing reps. But again, I haven't been paying a ton of attention to the trenches because no pads, and I think that's just such a huge variable that kind of muddies things for me. Ralph says, can you see Palmer being a younger Emmanuel Sanders for the Bills? I think they're different types of players. I think Sanders had a lot more fluidity to his game. It was a better vertical presence. I think Palmer can work downfield, but a lot of it is due to his deception and functioning within the scheme. I think there's a bit of a misconception on what type of receiver Palmer is, and people talk about him, the man beating piece, but a lot of people talk about him like he's just this also this big deep threat. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I do think there is something to be said for the precision that Emmanuel Sanders operated with as a route runner. I think Palmer operates with some of that. I think Palmer is more of a, and I think this comp is spot on because they spent time together with the Chargers. I think Palmer is a bigger Keenan Allen, or kind of in the Keenan Allen type of mold. Good release package, good footwork, underneath, intermediate. I know he's a bigger body type of dude and can get downfield, but I think he's built for the world of like 10 catches, 100 yards, not like 4 catches, 100 yards. Like I think he's somebody that's going to work in the intermediate, the underneath, the high underneath, anywhere from like 0 to 14 yards or 15 yards, I think is where Josh Palmer is going to see a lot of success. Joey says Cooper DeJean would have been a better pick than Keon Coleman, in my opinion, and we needed and still need safety help. Yeah, but I don't know how DeJean was going to translate to safety. We still haven't seen that yet. You know, him working in the slot, and he had a good year in the slot for Philly, but if you're talking about drafting DeJean and then putting him at safety, we still don't know how he would have functioned there. He didn't play safety at Iowa. It was a big projection to move him to safety in the NFL. So we still haven't seen that now at this point. But I think that's fair. Good athlete, good player, gives you some juice and some physicality and some size. So I get liking the player. I don't know if it solves the safety issue, because that was a big projection. But if it would have, I don't necessarily disagree. And yeah, to Buff Bill's 83 point, we have to wait how see Bishop. We have to wait to see how Bishop performs. Falling apart. So sorry. But yeah, overall fun time at camp so far. If you guys have any more questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, feel free to put them up into the chat. I'm going to put up the sponsor so I can talk about One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because they are the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. And if anyone doesn't know, I had reached out to another pizza place for a potential sponsorship on Twitter. One Pie saw my tweet. They DM'd me and said, if you like their stuff, you'll probably love our stuff. Come by. We'd love to give you a pie and see what's up. They gave me a free pie, and it changed my life. It was super good. And we haven't looked back since. So the online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni. They have a pizza named after us. It's called the Cover One Josh Allen Goat. It's got goat cheese and chicken and mozzarella and red onion and red sauce and all these different things and bacon. It's amazing. I don't even want to spoil it. So go check the online menu and see the details for it. They're great with every topping that they do. If you get veggies or different stuff, they chop them up all evenly and sprinkle them across the pie. They do a great breakfast pizza, and everything they do is delicious. They also have a catering division called Elevated Catering of Buffalo. So if I know we're getting into August, but if you're doing anything for events or summertime stuff or parties or picnics or whatever, check out their catering division. It's awesome. All these different kinds of mac and cheeses, this like coconut rice chicken dish that was great. Again, their food just hits and bangs in a multitude of forms and fashions. And as I always mention, they're really kind and generous when it comes back to giving to the community. Toys for Tots, partnering with Roswell to knock out cancer, partnering with the SPCA, the Alzheimer's Foundation. They're really good people, making really good food. And for Joe DeRosa in the comments, they have a great cheese to sauce ratio on the pizza. You take a bite, the cheese doesn't come off. It's just, everything is phenomenal. So go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Again, the online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. Buff Bills 83 says, do you think with these injuries, the Bills are being cautious with them? It seems like a lot of injuries so early. I do think they are being cautious. Time will tell if all these injuries are actually meaningful or if they're purely just precautionary. We'll see. Regardless, anytime they just have a slew of injuries. It's to important guys, and it's just a lot of injuries in terms of quantity and volume. Like there's a lot. I don't want to see them at all, but we'll see. We'll see. Jordan says, so if they move Bishop to free safety, who looks better in practice, Hamlin or Forrest? Hamlin's had a couple nice plays on the ball. I'm waiting to see what Derek Forrest looks like when the Bullets are live because camp is only going to tell us so much. I would probably put Hamlin slightly ahead of Forrest as of right now. But I think once the pads start popping and the Bullets are live in the preseason, I think Forrest will surpass Hamlin, but we'll see. Charles says, besides more play action, what new wrinkles do you hope to see from last season? I want more pistol. If we're talking offensive side of the ball, I want more pistol. I want more 13 personnel. So I want 3 tight ends on the field. I want Knox. I want Kincaid, and I want Hawes. I want more 21 personnel. I want more Reggie Gilliam on the field. And I would like more 6 offensive lineman sets, and I want them to run traditional counter and power out of them by putting Alec Anderson and Blast Mosin like they did last year. Towards the end of the year, I want that as a run wrinkle. So those are really the big chunks for me. And I'd like more deep shots off of play action in the, kind of put that in particular. More deep shots in general, but I think with the wide receiver core, they're going to need to manufacture it a bit. So I think they'll need play action with it. And then defensively, what we've talked about, I want more man coverage, more match coverage, more man coverage, more blitzes, more sims, more creepers, and more variety in their fronts. I'm tired of the 4 down static front. I want guys standing up. I want, an overload look. I want somebody lined up over the center. I want to attack protections. I want to create man protection rules and manipulate offenses into keeping running backs and tight ends in to protect when they don't have to. I want to create vulnerabilities in protection rules and exploit them and create matchups and mismatches for the defense. So that's a big one for me as well. I know that was kind of a lot. I don't know if you expected that, but yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Joe says, Ant, not sure if it's been discussed yet, but thoughts on McGovern's comments on Hawes and your view of him so far. I actually, not to cop out, I talked about this earlier because I talked about the tight end room in the training camp battle segment. It was towards the back end, probably around like the 50-minute mark, somewhere in that range. I'll timestamp it when I'm done here. But yeah, I thought he's looked good, really good blocker, good people mover. McGovern's comments were awesome and they aligned with my notes. I don't want to rehash it too much because I spoke on it. Thank you for also letting me know that you were late and didn't join the show earlier. I don't know why you're out. I guess you're out living your life, which seems kind of selfish, but to each their own. But yeah, good comment, Joe. Good thought. Yeah, I liked him. And I've liked him so far, I should say. And I am excited to see what he does in the preseason. And he's part of the reason why I want more 13 personnel as one of my wrinkles and one of my pieces. So yeah, good times. I'm going to throw up the banner. This is Toodles, folks. If you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video before you leave. We've still got a good chunk of people in here watching live. I got a downvote already, according to YouTube. I guess somebody didn't like the content. Downvotes hurt. Thumbs up help. So if you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. If you have not already done so, whether you're watching live now or watching later on YouTube, please, 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 and thank you. If you are willing and able, drop a like on this video here on YouTube. Joe says, was at Target for an hour and a half fighting for my life. Man, some of my biggest fighting for my life moments have been at various Targets when I was living in New York City. Yeah, man, I feel you. I'm glad you made it out. It's rough. Yeah. Drop a like on this video. If you're here on YouTube, turn on notifications here on YouTube for the Disguise Coverage playlist and check out the variety of content we have across the channel, especially with the season ramping up. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that is very much appreciated as well. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about this show if you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy the show or you hate me or anything like that, tell your enemies about this show and try and make them watch it and ruin their day. Yeah, I know. I see the comments. I don't know. Somebody downvoted. I don't know who it was, but they downvoted. I guess they didn't like it, which is fair, to each their own. Oh, also a bit of a programming note. As I have done in previous years, I will be doing the post-game show after each Bills preseason game. So for those weeks, we'll probably do a Disguise Coverage on that Tuesday, and then also sort of kind of be like 2 episodes per week. I'll do Disguise Coverage during the week, and then post-game after. So we will have some pieces with that. Bare minimum, we'll do the post-game show. I'll kind of see. I actually need to see what I've done in years past because I can't remember. I know I always did the post-game, but I don't remember if I did additional episodes in that week, but we'll find out. But at the very, very bare minimum, I will be doing the post game show for all of the preseason episodes once we start to get into that part of the off season stretch. Yeah, drop a like on this video. Tell people how awesome the show is. Give me a follow on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Give me a follow on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. I really appreciate everyone who tuned in live to this episode. I know we are starting to ramp up towards football season, so it's nice to start to see more people piling in, the questions, thoughts, the comments, the concerns, everything, the back and forth with each other in the chat, the back and forth with myself. Really awesome to see everybody out and engaging and have really productive conversations. So I appreciate everyone who tuned in live for this episode. Thank you very much. Again, I think I mentioned in the intro, it's always nice to see a good chunk of people tuning in live, especially when I'm solo. It makes me feel like I'm not solo, which is a nice feeling to have. And yeah, if you're watching post live here on YouTube, that's awesome. If you're listening, that's awesome. Whatever form or fashion your episode consumption comes in, I am greatly and sincerely thankful for it and appreciative of it. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you when I see you. Godspeed. And as always,